kinda lame. Let me go into more detail about that. Total War Warhammer 3. I figured I might as well put my hand in the ring, is a tactical, real-time strategy wargame taking place within a fantasy universe. It has various races and factions to choose from. Orcs, lizardmen, the French, the Balkans, and one of the original 4 races being the vampire counts. Essentially necromantic vampires that lead legions of undead stuff, from the skeletons to ghosts to giant bats, you get the picture. Ironic for a bunch of grave robbers is that their faction has now been dead the longest. Their last DLC nearly going 10 years without a successor, and their last noteworthy update was in 2017. But now, with Mr. Necromancer himself, Nagash, coming to town, we will almost certainly see updates to all of the less dead living factions, especially the vampires. So what would this look like? How would they adapt? Well, let's start from the beginning. In the early days of TTW, the vampires were unique, probably the most unique faction in that game. Back then, mechanics were simple. Fill a bar to get angry, do stuff in this book, bureaucratically deal with Boris Harbinger while angry farm animals torch the countryside. The vampires fit right into this fiesta, and once stood out on their own. On the campaign side of things, there were 2 ways of recruiting an army. Regular recruiting, where you bought people, or in this case zombies, from a barracks or something, and wait a bit for them to train, I guess. And raised dead, where you use a bit of dark power to slap the ground and get extra units instantly. So if you take a lot of casualties in a fight, you could just press a button and presto! Your soldiers just stood back up and are ready to play again. Also notice that they were the first faction to have corruption, essentially the first double-edged sword mechanic made in the trilogy. Vampire corruption turned land from healthy into the Balkans. Great for vampires, awful for everyone else, as they take passive damage when in that territory. On the other hand, you will take damage within non-corrupted lands because sun and vampires... Can I stop saying vampire? Either way, it incentivizes taking land fast and holding it until it's properly poisoned. Now in battle, they showed something that wouldn't be seen until the release of the Tomb Kings.
The undead fear nothing.
Essentially, because they're just magic puppets, your army of horror will not run for battle, unlike everything else that generally cares about their well-being. Instead, when their health gets low, they will slowly fall apart until the magic holding them together dissipates. Everything in your army is expendable to some extent. All except the lords, with a rich spellbook of attack and healing spells to make sure your army simply lasts longer than the other. These positive aspects, as well as the negative I will speak about soon, culminate to make a faction where the main idea is to rush forward as fast as possible, and to hold ground for as long as possible. Hey, kinda like the campaign. Now let's see how they evolve. They were part of the very first DLC, where they had a new lord and faction, Hellman Gorse. Unfortunately, they didn't know how to make DLCs at this point, so that was basically it. Next up, we have a free lord and faction with the Vlad von Karstein. After that, we had a new lord but no new faction with the Isabella von Karstein. Wait, what? In Warhammer 2, we are now in the race to find books that give random buffs. It mostly just ruins relations with other undead. Their next update was the Blood Kiss mechanic, a new currency where if you beat an enemy lord battle, you can buy buffs and lords from various vampire families. And these lords shake it up, like the Lamian vampire, which has the exact same abilities but with slightly different stats. Or the Necroc vampire, with the exact same abilities but with slightly different stats. Or the monkey with the exact same abilities but slightly different stats. Now with that out of the way, let's see how... Wait, that's it?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, man.
Let's start with the most devastating. They're not unique anymore. This trend started with the Tomb Kings, where they were another undead faction that outmatched the vampires in every single way. While they didn't have corruption, thus losing land was a much bigger issue, they also didn't suffer attrition when walking into someone else's yard. So the Tomb Kings could focus way more on actually conquering rather than just sitting in a house half the game waiting for your land to colonize itself. The Egyptian Bone Fellows also had on par to better infantry, cavalry, ranged, and monsters. Oh, and did I forget to mention that every single unit is free? That's right, a giant stone magical bowman is 100% cheaper than zombies. The only thing the vampires have above the Tomb Kings are stronger lords and more armies. Except not really for the latter, because the vampire economy is mid. Next up was the Vampire Coast, and while similar to the Counts, it's way more engaging because of 2 things. 1, you're sailing the ocean and your campaign's about fighting each race, or at least the rogue pirate equivalent. And 2, your army is mostly comprised of guns, along with plenty of more gimmicky units, meaning each battle you will strategize way more than just timing your spells correctly and right-clicking on enemies. Now you could say the Draculas still have their niche. You could play with a cavalry army that has basic melee characters to hammer and anvil. Or you could play with a close-knit army that's buffed by the Lord, meant to slowly whittle down the enemy. And then the demon showed up. Is nearly meaningless when fighting demons, as they too never leave. And those two niches, yeah, let me introduce you to Slaanesh and Nurgle. Slaanesh is the epitome of hammer and anvil. Vicious marauders and their well-armored chaos warriors are what the enemy get caught on. And the demons instead have a skill called Devastating Flanker. On top of that, you can literally take a unit from your foe before battle, which is basically the entire shtick of necromancy. Next up, Nurgle, who is attrition warfare given form. You just ball up your army and use spells to heal your own group and debuff the other. You can even debuff your enemies on the campaign with diseases. Not to mention the demons don't have what holds the vampires back in battle. For example, while your lords are strong, if they go down, the entire army collapses, literally. And there was one more, what was it? Oh yeah, you don't have any range. Seriously, as of Tides of Torment, you were the only race without any range. And while that can work, in this state, it really doesn't. That means the only thing the vampire counts have going for them is numbers. And all that means is more battle. And all that means is you're left to think about how there are many more factions which are more engaging, more interesting, and have more variety. Variety, that's the main word here. There isn't any in-depth or different ways to play the count. That means if you're playing another faction, like the Empire, the Bloodsuckers are easy to figure out, which means they're perhaps the worst thing a group of horror characters can be. They're not scary. What do you think when I say Army of the Dead? You probably think of a situation like this. It's a moonless night, either at the end of the month or it's just terribly cloudy. Doesn't matter to you, you're just here to get paid. You're just bummed you can't count the stars to pass this monotonous night on guard duty. Just as you were thinking of what you were going to have for lunch after your shift, you reach the graveyard. An awful chill runs down your spine. A mix of fear and respect for the dead. But it doesn't leave. In fact, it gets worse. The dirt under the gravestone shifts and churns as if it were a raged monster rudely awakening. Before you sound the alarm, a horrid screech comes from the underground. Then the hands are upped. Those who were once townfolk, soldiers, lords, rise from their grave. Wrath is detectable even in their empty eye sockets. They begin to scale the wall, wailing inhumanely as Moore's garden is defiled by those it was supposed to protect. Above you, bats blaze across the sky, crying and singing of blood and fear. The sound of the living and the dead screaming is confounded by the banging of the gates, as forever starving monstrosity pound with desperation. You freeze in terror, and that's when you see him. Two maroon eyes in darkness, hanging over two white hands. It was a crooked, evil grin. This is the last day you or your village is ever seen again. This is what they could be. When I play a Karl Franz campaign, I look to Sylvania, and when I do, I worry about Vlad. Not a Graveguard, Blood Knights, even a Vargulf. Vlad. One strong guy should not be what's frightening about the undead. It's not better for any other faction. Gorst is a footnote for whoever meets him, Manfred at worst is a nuisance, and the only reason Muzalan survives is dependent on how much a fat goblin draws attention to himself. So, how do we fix this? What I want to make here is the feeling of an entire army jump-scaring you. A mix between guerrilla warfare, organized crime, and a touch of randomness to give some flair. First of all, we won't change much with the buildings. As I said, their economy is mid, but that's only because everything else plays like a regular faction. The only thing that would change here is the removal of army buildings, and more units and garrisons to better defend. Remove recruitment buildings? Why? You all say in unison. Well, because all your recruiting will be entirely done through the raise dead mechanic, the center of this overhaul. Going through the start of a campaign, you have no units, but with a new default stance, skulking. It makes you immune to attrition and turns your lord invisible, with the caveat being you can't attack, and would turn off the moment you recruit a unit for said army. So you would use it to move a lord undetected to where they need to be, then start the invasion. And when recruiting, the number of units per raised dead would greatly increase, maxing out in peaceful regions at give or take 10. And when you enter a past battleground, you can get 20 units in one turn. Taking a page from the Tomb Kings, buying the initial unit would be free, but unlike the Kings, you would still have upkeep. Another disadvantage is recruitable units would be random, but there would be a way to tip the scales a bit that we'll get into later. This would encourage you to move quickly and not bother things like casualties, as each skeleton is now a replaceable financial burden. When you win a war and have no one else to fight in that region, you're still going to have to wait for corruption to take hold. Corruption is going to remain largely the same, but now you have a new way to respond to corrupting a region. When finished with your army, rather than disband, you have the option to unleash. Basically, you transfer your selected units to a brand new faction, whose whole purpose is to cause chaos or defend the region. While they have high relations with you, the best you can do with diplomacy is a defensive alliance. They act autonomously, and attack enemies just as much as they claim settlements. In order to make sure you don't accidentally create an empire stronger than yours, and to prevent you dropping AI armies all across your enemy's territory, the Unleashed army has 3 distinct weaknesses. 1. They can't recruit or regenerate their own forces, meaning even if lucky, they won't last long in hostile territory. 2. Their garrisons are weak and are always stuck at tier 1, so expect a few skeletons, some zombies, and maybe a dog or two. And 3. There are no diplomatic penalties to going with war with the Unleashed faction, so when they outlive their use, you can feel free to betray them. This allows your actual armies to keep moving, and it helps set the theme of expendability for everyone who isn't you. The next buff is what I see the most potential in, the key that brings variety, the Blood Kiss. Still collected from defeating enemy lords, still giving buffs to vampire lords, the main difference comes in the form of specialization. As for buffs, it makes specific units way stronger, but the real interesting part comes from lords, because their recruitment should change depending on which vampire house they are from. Let's say there is a pile of dead. Same battle, same army, everything. A Blood Knight would have more horses in his recruitment, a Strigo more monsters, and even a Von Karstein might find living units to recruit on his own. This means you can tip the scales on what you can recruit and add variety to the playstyle. Now with each army playing completely differently simply because of who's in charge. Battle, already being fundamentally shaped by the actions of the campaign, will need very few changes. These are mostly experimental ideas on what the new unit should be and what would happen to the old.
The undead fear nothing.
Is a true enough statement for the army, but what of the lords who are technically alive? With the proposed overhaul, it would make sense that when leadership is low, the living human necromancers would retreat, not fight till the last breath. It would also add separation between them and the vampires, who don't run, meaning their army could stick around much longer. Now to something a bit more iffy. If ethereal units could fly, it would give more ability to handle enemy range, and of course, add more variety. Also, it would solve this. Now to more units. Now I know what the Warhammer fans will say, "Mega, you incredibly sexy man. There are very few tabletop units for the vampires." Did I say, true, but you're forgetting something. You're necromancers. Stealing other people's stuff is kind of your thing. Think about it, skeleton dwarves, zombie giants, crypt ogres. If there was any time to do this, it would be now with every race here. It's not even that much of a stretch. The entirety of Kislev happened and they don't even have old world rules, so it wouldn't be that out of place. So those are my somewhat exaggerated grievances and how to fix the vampire count. If you have any ideas of how to fix the vampires, feel free to leave a comment. More ideas in the tank is always a good thing. And I'd rather be the guy who earns a subscriber rather than ask. Anyway, this video has been going long enough and I want to play some Total War. Outro or something.